Hey, what's up you guys? In this video we're gonna work on the mug in 3ds Max and Substance Painter, so please give this video a thumbs up and share it around if you will. Alright, so to start working on this mug in 3ds Max, we're gonna start off with something simple such as a cylinder, and of course we're gonna respect word scale, size, and everything else. So try to be reasonable and try to give it a certain amount of centimeters that will be actually acceptable in the real world, and you'll be okay. So of course you're gonna actually change the number of sides and convert to editable poly, and we're gonna delete the polygons that we don't need because we're gonna use the method that we call edge extrusion. And we're gonna keep holding shift all the time. We're gonna use the scale tool and the move tool in order to extrude these edges, and we're gonna actually build this mug using this method. So you're gonna see me repeating these things all over every time. So it's gonna be essential that you learn this skill. So you're gonna keep holding shift, then move or scale your edges in order to do the extrusion. And we're gonna use something else such as the chamfer tool, which is going to allow us to actually round things up and duplicate edges, duplicate vertices and stuff. This skill also is going to be really important. So here in the bottom, we are trying to create an inset because we need to create extra details in the bottom, and we're going to extrude that surface negatively. We're going to push it to the inside or push it upward, and as you can see, we're getting something that looks like this. Okay, so for now we're going to actually create another cylinder that is going to be on top of this one. We're going to make sure that we're going to activate the auto grid because it's going to be necessary that that is going to be exactly on top of it. We can use actually the alignment tool in order to align it exactly on top of it and exactly in the centers, because the matter of the z-axis or the vertical alignment was taken care of. And for now we're going to continue actually trying to extrude the edges in order to continue working on this mug, because we already worked on that base. It was simple, and the rest of it is also going to be simple, but it's going to be a little bit different because details are actually different every time you create something new. So you're gonna have when you learn how to do this, it's gonna be extremely easy and you can create whatever you want. And of course we are here trying to create the body of this mug, which is gonna be the most important thing because all the details are gonna be in this area. And for now I'm trying to create what we call a floating geometry, because this piece here is gonna be or this capsule here is gonna be all over the place. So what we will do is we will actually create this capsule, try to put it somewhere actually close to the body of the mug, and we're gonna create few copies that will go all around. And of course this is gonna be part of the high poly version because this is gonna be a floating geometry. We're gonna use it for baking later, and we're gonna talk about these matters when we reach the proper time where we will talk about it. Okay, so right now we will try to reduce, we will slice this capsule in half because we need only one half, the half that we need to see, and convert to editable poly. Probably delete the polygons that we don't really need because we don't really need them, and they are not going to add anything except that they're going to add some annoying polygons that we have to support and stuff. If we remove them, it's going to be much easier for us. Okay, so after we create them, we'll actually try to arrange some stuff, for example those edges, because we need more space. Or we can actually make the half capsule, which is going to be floating geometry. We're going to make it a little bit smaller, which something I don't really want to do because I want some of these details to be pronounced, and I want them to be seen from a distance. So probably we're gonna go with that. So right now we're gonna select one edge ring, and then keep holding control, select the polygon to convert edge selection to poly selection, then extrude them. As you can see here, extrude these polygons. We're gonna make sure that it is local normal. You can also use the bevel. Sometimes bevel works better, sometimes extrude works better. It actually depends on you. You can actually replace bevel with extrude, and you can actually modify it using the scale tool, because sometimes it's easy as that. Okay, so right now I'm using the hierarchy tool in order to actually center the pivot and align the pivot to the pivot of the mug. So in order to do this, you're gonna see do what I'm doing here, and also we're gonna copy this multiple times, 71 times or something like that, and make sure it is an instance, because if it is not, then it's going to be really hard to modify these pieces if we want actually to make some changes. Copying them as instances will allow us to see the different adjustment we do on one taking place on the others, and this will save us some time and save us sanity. Of course, we don't want to go crazy editing every one of those, because it's going to be literally stupid. Okay, for now we will actually select that border, and we will scale it in, because we want actually to close it from the inside, and we don't want our object here to be one-sided, since it's not gonna look good. Okay, so for now we will actually try to push it somewhere close to the bottom, and we will cap that border, and that should do it for the body of that mug. For now, we will go to create a line. So select the line and start creating a line like this, because we need a handle. Of course, every mug needs a handle. So right now we will try to create something that looks like this. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to look like mine exactly. And it actually is something that is open to actually adjustment and modifications at any moment. So probably you're gonna go with something later. You're gonna decide it needs to be smaller, or the position of some vertices needs to be actually changed or something like that. This is all okay. Or you can use a reference image for this matter. If you feel like you have good reference images, you can use them. You can create different handles. I sometimes try to do this, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I feel like I don't have to use the reference images all the time as blueprints, of course, because I'm usually using reference images on my second monitor. I'm looking at them, but I don't have to use them literally in my viewport. This is what I'm trying to say here. So you can actually change how these vertices look like, or their positioning, and you can reduce the number of these vertices. You can do whatever you want. I will try to smooth. I just smooth them out. I don't think this is a good idea, because I think this will result in tremendous increase in vertices and edges. This is not something I want to do, because it will be difficult in the process of creating the low poly version. So it already seems like it is too much. So I will try to reduce them probably by actually bringing all the vertices or all these points to actually corners. So we want them to be hard edges, because this will reduce the number of vertices and the number of sides we have, or the number of edges that will result due to this process. And if you want to add few of these when it comes to the process of creating the low poly version, it's gonna be okay. But when it comes to the high poly version, this is already being taken care of using the Turbo Smooth, which will add a tremendous amount of vertices and edges to make things look smoother very easily. Okay, so right now we'll try to add one edge in the top, because I think this is going to be important later. For now, we'll actually select a ring right there. Probably we're going to add 1 or 2 edges on top, because some of these edges need to be actually extruded. Okay, you can change the positioning as you want because it doesn't really matter. Actually, choose whatever size you want, whatever distance you feel it is the right one, and you will go from that. Okay, so here we're gonna do the same thing. Probably we're gonna lift this a little bit higher. And I'm actually trying to create enough place for the details I'm gonna create later in the process of texturing, because we're gonna add some details and sculptures and ornaments and stuff like these, because I really wanna make it look like something old and something actually something kind of from an era that that was really far away from what we are living in right now, and completely different. So it's gonna be probably medieval, or even something like I don't know. It doesn't matter, but it's really old and it is really fancy and nice compared to what we are using right now, because everything we use right now is flat and boring. Anyways, so for now we will actually extrude these polygons. So what we will do is what we've done previously. So we're gonna extrude them using local normal, because we want these surfaces to be extruded, or the distribution of the extrusion, we want it to be equal all around that circle. Okay, when we select everything here, we are actually meaning we actually wanting to actually create some layers. This is important because we want a high poly version and a low poly version. As you can see, select everything, create a copy, then give it a name to indicate that it is really a low poly version. And from that, we're gonna work on the high poly in order to make it really high poly, and later we're gonna jump to mess with the low poly in order to make it look like something that is really low poly. Okay, when it comes to the low poly, we're gonna delete the floating geometry, delete the details that I believe are gonna be actually brought back when using the high poly from the baking process and everything else. Using the normal map, the baking of the normal map, and these things are really important to know beforehand, because everything actually influences each other. So it's really important to know what you're doing before you actually do things, and you need to actually consider what you're doing and the effect that it is going to have on the next processes. This of course comes with experience and with repetition and with doing stuff over and over again. You kind of expect what is going to happen beforehand, and this is really important. So what we are doing here is actually trying to create the low poly version, as you know, and this involves reducing the amount of polygons we have, and we're going to remove all the edges and polygons that will actually keep the silhouette in place, and that we know that are going to be replaced using a normal map. Okay, so we are working on some of the issues here in the bottom from the inside, and yeah, this is what it looks like for now. Of course, I don't like angons, and I don't really want it to. Actually, we are now working on the high poly and support edges and stuff. It's the process of supporting the edges is important, because it is actually the way that we will use, or the method that we will use to keep everything in place after we use what we call the turbo smooth, which is actually a smoothing modifier that will actually smooth things out and make sure that the areas that we want to stay solid and sharp and hard edge we want them to actually appear that way. So this method we are using here will ensure that this will happen, and it will ensure that the areas that we want to keep in place will be kept in place. So you need to learn this, and after you actually practice it a few times, I think and I believe it's not going to be that big of a deal anymore. Okay, after we work on the body, we'll try to go back or go down to the base, which is going to be probably the same thing. This is not going to be a big of a deal because this thing here is completely repetitive. We do it all the time, and it's extremely easy. There are actually other methods to do it, but I try to stick with something that is simple for the sake of simplicity and for the sake of avoiding confusion and complicating stuff to a certain extent that is not easy for beginners to understand. Okay, so here we have all our floating geometry, our everything is in place. So I think the process actually of adding Turbo Smooth made the body of the mug actually change its size, which is actually interesting because this will imply that that this will actually result in a different alignment with the high poly and the low poly version, which is going to be problematic. But later we're gonna fix it. It doesn't matter that much since actually the baking process is a projection process, and even though it has to be exactly on top of it, sometimes we can fix stuff manually. This should not be a big of a problem. Okay, right now we're gonna work on the handle, which is gonna be actually the same thing, and that is gonna be extremely easy. We're gonna support it from three sides, from the first end, the second end, and from the sides. This is gonna be real quick, and we should see something smooth and nice. We can go, I think on this one we can go with 2 iterations on Turbo Smooth, but if you want to go with one, it's gonna be okay as well. Okay, for now we're gonna bring the low poly version, and we already work on it. I usually work on the high poly first, and I go to the low poly and UV unwrapping. So for this one, I actually it is an exception. So whatever. Right now we're gonna try to actually smooth things out. We're gonna work on smoothing groups. So what we will do is we're gonna clean the smoothing groups, and we're gonna auto smooth everything, and this should be fine. So clean smoothing groups and auto smooth everything. Okay, it seems like this handle lacks edges, so we'll try to compensate for it a little bit. We are not gonna overdo it. We're just going to add a few edges in order to make the process of baking a little bit better, since this is too much kind of the edges here are too little, too low, in order to keep up with the high poly. So we're gonna try to edge view these. If we don't do this, we will see some weird results in the normal map. So we better actually keep up with a little bit with the shape that the high poly is taking and the direction is going in. I think this is gonna be better for baking later. Okay, you can actually go further than this and actually add extra edges if you want to, because this, I believe this will make it look better, since this is an exception in terms of creating the low poly version. Sometimes it's really difficult, but for the most part it's gonna be just okay. Okay, so for now we'll actually bring back the low poly version and work on it alone. And what we will do is we will try to UV unwrap it. So we'll select one piece, which is gonna be the body of the mug, that bigger piece right there, and we'll open the UV editor and we'll start working on it. So we're gonna use the box mapping method, and you can see that there is a mess here. And what we'll do is we'll try to stitch everything together using the shortcuts. You can right click, stitch selected, or you can use the shortcut Shift S from the keyboard in order to stitch all the pieces together. After that, you need to actually organize everything, put everything in place, because this is really important. It's creating a UV template, or the process of UVing is all about organization and organizing all the pieces and actually putting everything in a nice way that will make it look nice and beautiful, and is gonna help the other person or the next person, if there is something who's gonna work next to you or is gonna be next in the pipeline, is gonna really find your work better. For example, if you are a modeling artist and doing UVs is part of your job, then it's gonna be easier for the texturing artist to have a nice time or a good time working on the textures, rather than having a hell of a time actually figuring out how you actually managed to did this messy and crappy job. So actually organizing UVs is really important for technical reasons and for artistic reasons. So after you organize your UVs, what you're gonna do is you're going to apply the checker texture. The checker is important for two reasons. Reason number one being that the texture is gonna tell you if there are any distortions, if there are any kind of if there is something wrong with how you UV'd or how you UV unwrapped your model. And the second thing is gonna help you to actually compare the size of the UVs and the scale between the different pieces, which will actually which is really important for proportion and things like these. So when we try to work on the second piece, which is going to be the base, we're going to do the same thing. and it's gonna be super basic, same stuff repeated over and over. And we're gonna stitch the selected elements, the elements that need to be stitched, Shift S from the keyboard, as usual, nothing complicated. I personally found it to be really hard to understand, wrap my head around the concept of UV unwrapping at first. I thought it was actually super difficult and stuff, and it was confusing. And at first time I learned about it, it was like I kind of grasped the concept, and then I didn't actually practice it for a month. When I came back to it, it felt like I didn't learn it in the first place because I didn't practice enough. So the key about the process of UV unwrapping is actually to practice it enough and to do it over and over again until it becomes natural, and it becomes second nature when dealing with it. And when you do this, when you reach that point, it's really your brain your subconscious mind kind of takes over, and you don't even think about it, like any other skill, by the way. So when it comes to the handle, the same thing, except that we have so many different pieces to stitch here, and this is not going to be difficult. So obviously this is easy to do. The thing is, you're gonna have to break this piece because it's gonna be extremely tall, and probably this is gonna be problematic when it comes to the process of creating the UV template, because it's super big. So what we'll do, and also because of the there are some 90-degree angles that we need to respect here. So we're gonna break 2 times. We're gonna break it 2 times, and this is gonna be helping us artistically and technically. This is gonna be actually a good thing to deal with, a good way to deal with it. It seems like there's something wrong here because this is too thin, or kind of it's in the wrong way. So it's actually a problem with the width. So what we will do is actually interesting. The first time I was working on it, I didn't realize what the hell is going on here. So it seems like why kind of it didn't. Sometimes you don't see things when you are working with them and stuff. But when you actually try to take a step back and look at it from a distance, you realize that that actually the size here is off, and somehow it's these pieces here are narrow, and they are thin. They should be wide and stuff. When you go actually to the perspective or the viewport, you're gonna see that right now everything is working just fine. Sometimes the UV editor does some unexpected stuff that you actually have to fix manually. I don't know why this happens, but it does happen. So if this happens to you, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. You need just to be flexible, and you need to be malleable, which means, by the way, that you need to be able to bend and shape yourself according to the situation. You don't have to be rigid and click the same button over and over again and tell yourself why the hell this is not happening, why it is not working. You need to actually change stuff, try things, try different things, because sometimes you can't figure out what is going on until you accidentally stumble upon it. Sometimes you gotta trial and error is really important. Okay, so it seems like we worked on the UVs for this mug so far, and what we'll do right now is we'll try to attach all the pieces together, because right now we want to create what we call the UV template. So the UV template is the final result, and it is the fruit of our efforts here, because we want actually, after we are done with everything else, what we want from 3ds Max is we want the low poly version, we want the high poly version, and we want to export a UV template. This is what we want. Anything else is secondary. So these are our objectives, and each one of these has its own kind of technical stuff that we need to deal with, but this is what we need. We need a low poly version that we need to export. We need to export high poly version, and we need to export a UV template that we're going to use in Photoshop. So for now, after we are done with the UV template and stuff, we're gonna now go to naming our pieces. Naming our pieces is gonna be important for different reasons. First of all, it is a good way to recognize which piece is which, and the second thing, which is actually the extremely crucial thing, which is that the fact that in order to bake properly in Substance Painter, in order to bake our maps, we need proper naming, because Substance Painter has a method of baking which is going to be by mesh name. This is a revolutionary. You need to understand that this is a revolutionary method of baking, which Substance Painter uses. Earlier, back in the time when people still used Photoshop and stuff, in 3ds Max, there was a method that is called the exploded bake and stuff. You need to explode your mesh to do a ton of things. Now in Substance Painter, you can bake your model in a matter of a minute or two. Okay, here we are in Substance Painter, and what we'll do is we're gonna bring the low poly version to the scene. As you can see here, it seems like we have a situation, which is not that big of a deal actually. So right now we'll bring the high poly version. We will actually change the to mesh by name. We're gonna actually change the suffix and the suffix of the high poly and the low poly, and do a test bake. So if the test bake gives us a nice result, it means that we have a green light, or we've been green lit in order to actually do the real bake. Okay, so you're gonna follow these parameters here in order to get a nice solid bake. You don't have to follow me exactly what I'm doing here, but what I'm doing here is typical, and it is the default, and these are the default values I use most of the time. And after half an hour or something, your bake is gonna be done, and you should see something like this. So when you see something like this, it means that you are done with the baking and it's now time for texturing. So I'm going to use simple materials, smart materials, and I'm going to export our textures here, and we're going to go to Photoshop. So here we are in Photoshop, and we have our UV template that we exported from 3ds Max. This is our normal map we exported from Substance Painter. And there are some issues with the normal map. It's a little bit gradient and stuff, but we'll fix it later. For now, I will bring this ornament here, or this design here, or this drawing. Use whatever you want, whatever works for you, and try to place it in that area, and that exact area that you can see here, or any other area, by the way. And this is also up to you. Do whatever you want, because it's your model after all. And what we are trying to do here is actually we are trying to create a mask. This mask is going to be important because we're going to use it using a fill in order to actually add some nice details to the model, to the mug that we have in Substance Painter. So don't don't focus too much on the normal map and the UV template and stuff, because what we are here to do in Photoshop is to create a mask. So we're gonna end up with a black and white map that we'll use with a fill layer. Okay, this weird piece of ornament, it's actually beautiful. This piece here is also going to be part of the mask. So what we'll do is we will try to place it in certain places. For example, this piece here that it was destined to be placed in, and as you can see, we are trying to duplicate it. So to duplicate in Photoshop, by the way, you need to keep holding Alt and move it in order to duplicate it. You can use names. You can actually change names of layers in order to recognize them, because if you are using so many layers, it's going to be confusing and it's going to be really hard to deal with them. So for now, I'm gonna duplicate these layers or these pieces of ornament in order to cover the whole area, and make sure to crop it from the sides in a nice way, because you're gonna make sure that when you look at it in Substance Painter, because in 3D it's gonna be different. So make sure that the both ends, the ends are gonna meet each other perfectly. This is important because you don't want to actually give an impression that that there is something wrong with the model. And I think this actually takes a few takes, probably 2 or 3 takes, in order to get it right. If you're really careful, probably gonna get it from the first time. So we're gonna hide everything. We're gonna keep only the black and white stuff, and we're gonna bring our mask that we exported from Photoshop. We're gonna bring it over to Substance Painter. So this is our mask here, and what we will do right now is we will actually create a fill layer. We're gonna add a mask, and actually gonna add a fill to it, and we drop our mask on top of it in that specific area, and boom, this is what we have. So you can actually change the color of it. You can actually add height, which is also important. And after that, we will be ready to go to do whatever we want. So I hope you like this one. If you found it interesting, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you are Patreon, thank you very much for supporting this channel. And of course, as you know, if you want to become a Patreon, that means you will be able to get access to the full environment art early on, and you're gonna have to become a Patreon in order to get this feature, and you're gonna actually be able to, as I said, to get access to all the tutorials at once. No waiting, no nothing. So thank you very much, and I will see you in the next one.